Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Japanese 101, Lesson 6. Had to think there for a second, but it's Lesson 6. That is 5 plus 1. We have reached an amount of lessons such that I'm no longer able to show it on one hand. Now, if that's not a milestone, I don't know what is. Last time on Japanese 101, I was sick. Well, that was last week, and then the week before, we discussed verbs. We did our sort of part 2 of our verb intro, and, well, I think that went fine. That went quite well. I also just finished the document, and the YouTube upload is also available. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you obviously know. Today, however, building on what we learned, I'm going to do a little intro into politeness. Now, I've sort of promised this for a while now. I've sort of been putting off politeness as a concept a little bit. I've sort of put it in the background a little bit, so that now we can take our time and properly discuss it. Again, until now, we have basically been sticking to, let's call it a casual mode of speech, or a more like, we've been introducing the dictionary form of verbs. For those of you that may have forgotten or don't know that term, it's fairly simple. If you have any verb, such as taberu, and you go in a dictionary, right, such as this one here, what you'll find is taberu listed as this. Now, even if your textbook taught you tabemasu, right, and if we type that, the dictionary is probably most likely still going to show you taberu, because that's what's considered the default form, the unconjugated form. And yes, so from that standpoint, and because that is how it is, and sort of, in my opinion, because it makes conjugations easier, I've only been talking about dictionary forms until now. But no longer, because now that we have a groundwork, now that we've learned a little bit about the conjugations and the base forms, I think it is time to now give a little bit of an intro to the basic politeness level, and we're going to learn the Masu-form today. Again, for those of you that have gone through textbooks or similar things, you may already know the Masu-form. You may have started with the Masu-form, but good for you, because now basically you get to, first of all, you get to review, and second, you may see a new perspective on it that you didn't previously, or that you weren't previously aware of. Okay, so first of all, this may seem obvious, but let's talk a little bit about what we mean with politeness. Politeness level has to do with respect, okay? And in Japanese, that's very important. Politeness is to do with the relative standing of people, standing, or like social position, okay? Who has to be polite towards who is sort of dictated by this unwritten hierarchical structure that still sort of exists in society, mostly in Japanese society, but arguably in any society. And politeness has to do with sort of showing respect towards other people, and politeness is always sort of works in relative terms, okay? That's why I wrote down it's relative. It has to do with relative standing, okay? Now, the basic situation of politeness is basically that you have two people, and I'm going to draw some of my famous stick figures that are always nice. You have two people, one here and one here, okay? And their position is sort of just metaphorical, okay? But one is standing up here and one is standing down here. I don't know if I'm told, but for sake of argument, it seems we're doing the casual forms and things like the past tense at the end of the second book in the series. Yeah. I just sort of disagree with that approach. Hopefully I can convey that sufficiently in the course of this series. So you have two people, and they have a sort of a standing, right? I mean, they're literally standing here in my frame, but they also have a social standing. They have a relationship, right? So what could this relationship be? Well, the simplest one is sort of just, you have this axis of age, okay? Age is sort of like a nice, simple sort of axis that we can look at. One person is just older than the other, okay? If one person is older than the other person, then generally when this person speaks, they have to sort of address upwards. And when this person speaks, they sort of address downwards, okay? And usually, what that will lead to is that this will be polite. Senpai kohai culture, basically, right? This will be more polite. Polio. Polite. And now, this one here is also interesting because it's not necessarily then casual, but it could be. So sometimes this could also be polite, and sometimes this could be more casual, but the need for politeness is much less. That's sort of the point. Sort of the social need to be polite on this one here going down is much less than it is going up. Now, we could also say instead of age, this could be like position at company. So maybe this is your boss, right? Maybe this is your boss. Then also, once again, the pressure on you to be polite is much higher, right? Than it is on your boss to be polite towards you. So, and again, we're just talking concepts right now. I'm not, so this part of the lesson isn't for you to learn any like words or any conjugations. This is to understand concepts. So to understand the concept of politeness, you have to sort of understand the concept of how these positions can work relative. Now, where it gets interesting is that this is just the simple situation between two people. But sometimes you have like multiple people. And politeness can be much more fluid than a lot of people think when they first learn about Japanese and how politeness works. If you have a whole group of people, so this is the reason why a more higher standing person might speak to you casually even if you use polite forms. Exactly. It's all relative. The pressure on you to be polite can be much higher towards someone of higher standing than the pressure of them to be polite to you. Now, I'm saying this completely without value. I'm not saying that this is good or bad or whatever, but this is generally how it works in social situations in Japan. And it's just how people talk to each other. Older people, when you address people that are older than you, generally the pressure for you to be polite is higher than the pressure for them to be polite to you. Now, please don't get me wrong, okay? I feel like this is something a lot of people think, but what's important is that non-polite is not always the same as rude, okay? Non-polite is not always just rude. That's kind of different. What a lot of people think is that when these people, like your boss, is going here and he's being non-polite, right? That is like he's being rude to you and that he's just doing that because of his position. But that's really not a great way of thinking about it. When he's speaking in non-polite / casual here, casual. I can't spell. Casual. It's not like he's being rude to you, okay? It depends. It's all sort of on a spectrum. It's a lot more, at the same time, it's a lot more fluid, but it's also a lot more complicated than what you may think. Politeness level isn't just the matter of either you're polite or you're rude. That's not how it works. You can be non-polite, and that's perfectly fine, depending on who you talk to. Like, talking in non-polite to a kid is not rude. It's just a normal thing to do, usually. Because you don't have to, like, show a great amount of, like, it sounds so weird, but you don't have to show like a great amount of respect towards people that are so much younger than you. You can respect them, but the way it reflects in your language is different. So that's like the general situation, right? Now, there is many situations, and let me make some space here. There are many situations where it's perfectly fine to have two people, two adults, two normal people that are just like, you don't quite know, they're just random people, right? They don't know each other. They don't work at the same company, maybe even. They just met each other on the street. So they will generally tend to be polite to each other, okay? So this exchange here will tend to be polite both ways. Polite. And generally, even amongst younger people or amongst people that are just sort of They don't have a set relation already. They're strangers, or they just met each other, or whatever. Politeness, or a base level of politeness, can be a good default. It's a good first way of interacting with someone you don't know. So, yeah. And again, there's some lenience to this. For example, if you're at a university or at a school and everyone's sort of your age, and you know everyone's like, so you know everyone's around your age, everyone kind of is in the same circle, then it may even be okay to talk casually to people you haven't met. It's a little bit of a sort of, you have to sort of, you know, test the boundaries. So if people start speaking to you casually, then maybe it's okay for you to speak casually too, and you can just do that if they're sort of the same age or whatever. If some people in Japan, or some Japanese people are a little bit more open about it, they'll just tell you. They'll just be like そんなに敬語使わなくていいんです or そんなに丁寧語を使わなくていいんですよ or 使わなくていいよ if they want to be like casual about it. They'll be like, you don't have to use 丁寧語 as much. You don't have to use it. It's okay. 丁寧語 being polite language, right? 丁寧語 polite language, must this, etc. So some person may tell you that, though some person may also not, because they think it's maybe inappropriate. This is where it gets a little bit, you know, a little bit of a gray area thing. But I heard there are couples that use this must after years being together. Yeah, that's true. So like, some people really never get past that point. It also depends on like your view on this. Like, I wouldn't do this, and I know people that are married in Japan that definitely don't do this. But I also know that there are people that do this. It's sort of just a thing where, yeah, certain people are like very traditional about it, and they just want to like be very formal and polite and blah. And it's like, you know, Japan still has, even though the numbers have gone down a lot, they still have arranged marriages. So it's essentially just like two people that don't really know each other that were sort of made to marry each other, not like by force, but just by like choosing to go into an arranged marriage, stuff like that. So yeah, but all this is to say that politeness level can be a little bit tricky, okay? And you sort of have to feel your way through it. And also something that a lot of people don't really understand, or a lot of people don't really grasp at first, is that politeness level can be very, very fluid within a conversation. Most of all, if there's more than just two people. So if you have like 3 people, okay? If you have 3 or 4 or even more people, or you have a bunch of people, like you have you have a little people here. No, you have like a bunch of people. Oop. And you have a person here. Sherpa, thank you so much for the follow. フォローありがとうございます. You have a little person here. And you have a person here. Let's draw 5 of them, okay? Just 5. Okay, and let's say that red arrows are polite and yellow arrows are casual, okay? You can have like different things going on here. Say these 2 people are friends. Well, they may have a yellow arrow between them. However, say this person here is new to the group. They haven't met anyone before. So they may tend to be a little bit more polite, except towards maybe this guy. Maybe this guy introduced him to the group, right? And then this guy's like this. But also at the same time, so he's casual with this guy. Let's make this a little bit clearer for adding P for polite and C for casual, okay? I'm just, like, this is an example. You don't have to, like, remember this diagram. Oh, Comp, thank you for the follow as well, before I miss you. You don't have to remember this diagram, but it's just an example of a situation that may arise where many different levels of casual or politeness can exist at the same time. So say maybe this guy is a lot older than this guy, even though he was introduced. So he may still be polite towards him, right? And like, it goes on and on and on. It can get complicated, or it can get very fluid in that regard. Like if multiple people are involved, each of their relationship, each of their standing can be very different. And then maybe this guy is just very, very young. He's just the youngest out of the group. And since he's pretty old already, he'll just be default casual with this guy, right? So it can really be quite fluid. It can really be quite complicated depending on the situation, right? And again, keep in mind that not being polite does not always mean being rude. And additionally, sometimes being overly polite can come across as a little bit strange. So what I mean with this is mostly, and we'll maybe talk about this now, but there's multiple levels of sort of polite speech in Japanese. Let me not delete something that is kind of important. Yes, let's actually get rid of all this. So, generally you have sort of like 3 different levels here, and let's use a dictionary to make our lives a little bit easier. So you have tameguchi, okay? Tameguchi is a Japanese term, usually means casual, unreserved speech, peer language. It's the sort of talk that friends use among each other, okay? Degozaru, so desu ne. So you have a tameguchi, okay? So this is sort of like the lowest level of casual. It's very casual. It's not polite. It's just standard casual language, and it's tameguchi, okay? So we have tameguchi. This would be guchi, tameguchi, okay? So this would be the lowest level, and then sort of a little bit above that, or quite a bit above that actually, you basically add teinego, okay? Teinego, which is polite language. So it even says in the dictionary, this and mas generally, which by the way, mas is also what we're gonna learn today, how to do that. So you have this sort of default polite language, teinego, okay? It's a bit of a pain to write, but we'll get it done. So it's this kanji, and then this guy, which I think kokoro, and then right. Teinego, and go of course means language, right? Before I run out of space here, so let's add some furigana. Te ne go. And then the top level that you'll usually see is keigo. Even though arguably some people may say that teinego is a type of keigo as well, because specifically keigo just translates to polite language, but generally the most concise version of this hierarchy that I've seen is basically tameguchi, teinego, and keigo. So keigo is like very, very polite language. This is generally what will be used if you're like in a customer service environment, and you are the customer, then people will use teinego for you, or keigo, sorry, keigo. So keigo is up here, okay? Keigo. All right, if you can sort of read my scribbles there, but I hope you saw them in the dictionary as well. So these are our 3 levels, okay? Today we'll be mostly focusing on tameguchi and teinego, and keigo is going to be another topic for fairly later, somewhat significantly later, not for today. So this is our sort of area of focus for today. Is it best to total beginners start memorizing kanji as they appear? Yeah, I like learning kanji with vocab. So if you can have some vocab with that, it usually makes it a lot easier. So again, let's forget about keigo. This is like, keigo is for like, you know, customer service stuff. Is customer with it's with an O, right? Customer? Oh gosh, never mind. Aita, koncha. Why is my brain so loopy sometimes? Okyaku. Right, customer. Okay, got it. 違う. Customer. Service, etc. Not very nice handwriting there, but you'll get the gist of it, okay? So this is keigo, is like customer service. So like if you go to a restaurant, it's the whole de gozaimasu or itadakimasu or itadakimasu and stuff like that. Now itadakimasu is also just an expression that a lot of people use. It's just what you say when you start eating. But grammatically speaking, or if you break it down, it is a keigo expression. It is very polite language. For today, we're going to focus on the realm of how to get from tameguchi, which is basically what we've looked at the last 2 weeks of learning these standard forms, such as, you know, what we had like taberu, tabenai, tabeta, tabenakatta, right? These conjugations of to eat. which would be considered tameguchi because they're not any sort of formal or or polite conjugation, right? So to manage that, we have to learn about mas, and that's what we'll do now. So let's learn about mas. So mas is essentially an auxiliary verb, okay? Now I know most of you will not have learned it as an auxiliary verb, but essentially it is. So you have this verb mas, okay? Mas, okay? Wow, I kind of did that pretty well there. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good mas. Okay, so in its essence, this is an auxiliary verb. Aux verb, okay? What's an auxiliary verb? An auxiliary verb is a verb attached to other verbs to modify them in some way. Now, what does mas modify? It modifies how polite the verb is. So how do we make the mas form of any verb? Usually you'll call this the mas form or the mas conjugation. Keigo, kenjougo, teineigo. I don't even know, is that chojugo? Bikago, all parts of keigo. Yeah, generally speaking, yes. But some of them are more obscure. Like, I would bet you even a lot of Japanese people don't really understand bikago that much. Bikago has to do with attaching of honorifics and stuff like that. And I don't even know that much about it. It's complicated. It gets really complicated. But for today, we'll keep it simple. The goal is to keep it simple. So again, we'll learn the so-called mas form of verbs today. So mas form of verbs. Which means that for any verb, generally, basically for any verb, there will be a conjugation that will end in mas, or rather, there will be a conjugation that we can attach mas to, and then it will be polite, okay? And it will be polite on the level of teinego, what we just looked at, which is sort of your everyday politeness level, you know? It's not ultra polite, so much so that you sound weird, because note, again, like I said, overly polite speech can be interpreted as weird. You don't want to sound like the help desk at a hotel when you're meeting someone for the first time. It sounds weird if you're being overly polite. People will be like, they'll feel like you're distancing yourself too much. So what you want to do is you want to be on this sort of teinego level, this mas form, which is perfectly acceptable. So how do we get there? Well, we need to learn about this mas form. So how do we make the mas form? Well, lucky for you, if you paid attention last week, sorry, not last week, if you paid attention last episode, which is a while ago, arguably, but maybe for some of you that read the subscriber document, at least those of you that are subscribers, you remember what we called the negative stem. Do you remember that? It was the process of switching from or it's the process of switching from an u sound, sound, to an a sound. That was the negative stem. Do you remember that? We switched an to an a, and then we added nai. We got the negative form. And it's what we called the negative stem form. To give you an example, we had something like kaku, which is to write, right? I'll write it down here. Kaku. We went to, we switched the u sound to an a sound, so we got kakanai. Well, I kind of took it away there, but we got kaka, and then we added nai. Okay, and we called this part here the negative stem, this kaka. Well, lucky for us, a very, very almost identical process applies to what we will call the mas stem. Or in Japanese, this is called the renyoke. You don't have to know this, but I can show you real quick. Renyoke. Renyoke basically is the mas stem, a conjunctive form. The mas stem of a Japanese verb. Again, you don't have to know this word. It's just I can show you here. This is what you would call it in Japanese, just like in the negative stem would be called mizenke. Okay, we can also look that up. Mizenke. So the negative stem would then be referred to as mizenke, okay? But you don't have to know this. As long as you remember what I will use generally... Ooh, sounds. What I will generally use is mas stem or negative stem. Those are the words that I will use, okay? I won't rely too much on the specific Japanese terminology because it gets a little bit too much for this, for the sort of, you know, the sort of realm of this video series. But I will expect you to remember mas stem because mas stem is going to be extremely important for many things, as you'll see in the future. So, let's learn how to form this mas stem. Lucky for us, like I said before, it is very much similar to how the negative stem worked when we saw the week before last week. So, we used to have a change from U to A, and all we need to do now is change to an I sound, okay? I'll show you a little bit of a better example here, or not a better example, but an easier sort of illustration of that. Let me see. I have a nice little picture here that I can just drag in real quick. So if you remember this illustration, this is actually from the subscriber document. So those of you that are subscribers that may have already looked at the document will maybe recognize this. So I will just sort of resize it a little bit. Okay. Now, we don't need this lower part here, so I'm just gonna rasterize and then just cut out this part. We don't need this. Alright, but this sort of illustration here works just fine for our purposes. What I'll do is just quickly... Oh, what layer am I on here? Oh, deselect. There we go. I'll just quickly sort of go through all the sounds. So, to remind you, what this represents here is basically every single verb ending, okay? Because in Japanese, there's only so many possible ways a verb can end, and these are all of them, okay? You can only ever have a verb that ends in u, ku, gu, su, tsu, nu, bu, mu, or ru. Those are all of them, okay? If you know all of these, you're donezo. You're good, okay? Those are all the verb endings that you'll ever encounter in modern Japanese. In fact, the joke is always that, look, well, nu is only one. There's only one verb that ends in nu in modern Japanese, and that's shinu, to die. So now, if we move from an u to an I, okay, or more specifically, this should be an u to an I, okay, because it's Japanese. Remember, Japanese phonetics, you don't have an u, you have an and you don't have an I or an I, you have an I, okay? So we go from U to I. What do we get? Well, it's fairly simple. First of all, let's go here, right? U. So let's think of a verb that ends in U. For example, kau. Kau is to buy something, okay? I'll make an example verb for each of these sounds again. Kau. Kau, to buy something. Okay, fairly easy. Purchase, buy. So what do we get from U? We get I. Straightforward. We just go from U to I. And it's specifically godan verbs, right? Yes. So let's so this is for godan, right? Godan. Well, ichidan is easy, but we'll look at ichidan after this. But godan verbs are the tricky ones. So for ichidan, well, if you want to do ichidan, ichidan is very easy, right? Ichidan is just, you take away ru and then you add mas, basically. So the mas stem of ichidan verbs is just the stem of ichidan verbs. And like we discussed 2 weeks ago, or actually that was like 3 weeks ago now, the mas stem of ichidan verbs is always just the verb without ru. So for ichidan, right? Ichidan, you just basically go something ru to something ru or without ru and replace with mas, okay? So taberu, tabemasu. That's ichidan. It's very simple, right? You just take the stem, which is just take away ru and then add mas. Taberu, tabemasu. Ikiru, ikimasu. So that's all it is. It's super simple. And then for godan, you just shift the vowel again. Godan is a matter of a vowel shift once more. So this should be white. So godan, would be a vowel shift, which we are looking at now, right? So kau, we had here, kau to buy would be ka-u, so u goes to i, and then mas, kaimasu, okay? We'll make some examples after we've gone through all the sounds, and then it should be pretty clear at that point. Ku, again, ku isn't hard. Well, we already get some examples by Kao there, like kaku, to write. Ku is, again, very straightforward. We just change the vowel to an i, and we get kaki. We get kaki, kakimasu. Ki. Gu is very simple as well. It just turns to gi, okay? Gi. For example, Kao's example was nugu. Nugu means to strip or to take off your clothing. A very oyogu. Oyogu is also a good one. So oyogu to swim. So what would be oyogu? What would be the polite form? The Masu-form would be mas stem, which is oyogi, and then mas. Oyogimasu. That's the polite version of that. Oyogimasu. So, you know, if you're talking to your swimming teacher and you're wanting to be polite, you want to be nice, you don't say oyogu, you say oyogimasu, I'll swim, you know? Su. Next one would be su. Su is, once again, it's simply a shift in the kana table. If you have a mental kana table in your head, then you'll know that if we have a kana like u, ku, su, tsu, etc., we just sort of shift that up by well, it's a, I, u, e, o, right? So we shift that up by 1, and we have the corresponding character sort of right above that. So su just turns into shi. That's a very ugly shi. There. Why can I not make a nice shi? That's sort of better, but not great. So su turns into shi. So you have something like hanasu, to talk. Hanasu, right? Hanasu. A bit late. It's okay, Ishan. Kini sen nakute. Hanasu turns into hanashi, and then that turns into hanashi plus mas. Again, remember, I'm gonna say this over and over and over until hopefully everyone sort of is sick of it. We're making the mas stem, a stem form, which is sort of a core form that we can attach something to. And as the name says, mas stem is for attaching mas, okay? Because mas is an auxiliary verb, essentially. So again, hanasu turns into hanashi, turns into hanashimasu. I talk, I will talk, or we will talk, or whatever. There's not really a pronoun attached there. So next is tsu. Actually, so if you remember from the negative stem, someone said that spelling konnichiwa as konnichiwa isn't slang or whatever. I would say they were probably wrong. I mean, konnichiwa spelled with wa is generally, it's two things. It's either wrong or slang. So like either you would, if you're trying to spell it, you said it is. Isn't slang? No. It is slang. Wait, I never said that. I'm fairly sure I never said that. So maybe you misunderstood. There's two versions. If someone is trying to be very, very correct, then using wa is just, well, if someone is trying to be like super correct, then wa is just wrong, right? In an essay, if you're writing an essay at school, then this is just wrong. But if you're writing a text message to your friend, then that's fine. Then it's just slangy. The problem is that a lot of beginners don't know that it's slang and they think it's correct. So that's why you'll often get corrected. It's sort of a tough line to walk, because as someone that is like online trying to teach people, you'll get a lot of people thinking that the correct spelling is with wa, okay, with this, when it's not. This is not considered correct spelling. I mean, if you go into a dictionary, it won't like tell you that. It's like writing though in English, basically. What about konnichiwa? Is this formal, just archaic? At this point, it's almost archaic. Most people will read this as honjitsu wa. So yeah, honjitsu wa. Well, oh, you meant to write honjitsu? Well, honjitsu is fine. Usually, I mean, konnichi would usually be spelled as kyo. If you look it up. This is a bit of a tangent, but whatever. So kyo can theoretically be read as konnichi. So you could say konnichiwa, but if you write this, 9 out of 10 people, no, let's say 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 people are going to read it as kyowa, because that's just how it's used in modern Japanese. No one really spells konnichi in kanji. I mean, I spell it with wa in informal setting. You can do that, yeah. What about, there you go. I've also heard people say that spelling it with wa is fine, that makes you feel better. Yeah, again, it's slangy. It's like online, you'll see it a lot. On Discord, when Japanese people talk, on Twitch, you'll see it a lot. But there is a difference between what's considered correct if you're in a class and what is considered okay to use. 今日はいい日だ. You already have an outline of what grammar will be presented which lesson? Not really. I sort of pick a topic. Pretty spontaneously, but always thinking of what we've already done and where we could move next. That being said, let's actually move on forward before we fall behind too much. So we had a tsu, for example, tatsu, to stand. Tsu just turns into chi. Again, nothing special about that. Chi. Nu turns into ni. I'm gonna go a little bit faster because really there are no exceptions here. You'll see that this is very consistent. It's just a matter of changing a vowel. Nu turns into ni. So shinu becomes shinimasu. Shinimasu sounds a little bit like you're sort of giving up on life. You're like, I'm going to die now. Shinimasu. Bu turns into bi. So again, nothing out of the ordinary here, except that I can't make a nice bi kana. Mu is mi. And ru is ri. Okay? So let's finish some of these examples up. We had a chi, tatsu, tachi, tachimasu. Nu, shinu, shinimasu. Bu, yobu, to call someone, right? Yobu, yobimasu, yobimasu. Mu, yomu, to read. Yomimasu, right? Or ru, for example, iru, to need. Iru is like a bit of a weird one because it's like iru, to exist, to be there. So iru, to need, right? Iru would be irimasu, irimasu. Yeah, it's not just most, it's all of them. There are actually no exceptions for godan verbs. So remember, if you have a godan verb, and to recognize this, you can use a dictionary. Seriously, knock knock. Thank you so much for the 4 months. Welcome back. Okay, that's cool. Yes. So the reason why I really like this way of explaining it is because, I mean, there literally are no exceptions. It's very convenient. So like if you go to a dictionary, it says godan verb, you sort of already know. You're like, well, okay, I know how to conjugate this. So this is the mas stem, okay? So getting mas stem, basically you do this procedure and you'll end up with mas stem. And all we need to do is add mas at the end and we have our conjugation, our finished conjugation. It is very convenient, it really is. So yeah, that's really all you need to know. And also, when you're a little bit more familiar with what we did last, or the last lesson, with the negative stem and stuff like this, you'll see that almost everything in conjugation works like this, okay? That's definitely helpful to know Godan Ichidan. Yes, most of all because that's what dictionaries use. I feel like almost the main argument is because most dictionaries rely on this terminology, so knowing what it means is quite important or quite helpful, because if you don't know this term, then you lose out on a lot of information. Just this alone gives you a lot of information about how to conjugate it. I never use the conjugation features on websites because you don't need to. As nice as they are, like this it's nice, you know, it's nice to have this. You really don't need to use it. Conjugation in Japanese is consistent enough to where if you know the rules, you can conjugate anything you see the first time you see it, basically. To remove last syllable mas and like that, tabemasu. So those would be ichidan verbs. If we go look up any ichidan verb, like ikiru. Okay, ikiru is an ichidan verb. It says ichidan here. So for ichidan verbs, all you do is you get rid of ru and you add mas immediately. Why? Because ichidan verbs always have the same stem, okay? we're still making the mas stem. It just happens that for ichidan verbs, the stem is always the same. No matter if it's the negative stem or if it's the mas stem, it doesn't matter. So the negative stem of ikiru is also iki, and then nai. Ikinai. Ikinai? Wait, that makes no sense. Sorry. Tabenai, ikinai. I guess it's ikinai. Sounds weird to me, but yeah. No, it's probably fine. Ikinai. No, that makes sense. It's just a bit weird. Ikitenai. Usually people don't say ikinai, maybe that's why. I feel like, ikinai is a correct conjugation, but I feel like you wouldn't say it. You would say like ikitenai, ikiteinai. Not alive. Ikinai sounds like you're about to not be alive anymore. It sounds weird. Anyways, taberu may be a better example. It is a correct conjugation, ikinai. It just sounds a little bit strange. I feel like you usually wouldn't say that, but that has other reasons. So you have taberu, or maybe something like kakeru. Kakeru. Kake is the stem for anything. Any stem you need, it's just that. Word film, word band, and Iceland called ikiru. Nice. So for ichidan verbs, all conjugations will be very simple because it's just a matter of getting the stem. And for ichidan verbs, you know, ichi, it only has one stem. So there's only one stem you have to learn. There's like the one stem. It's just getting rid of ru, and that's it. And then you can just add stuff. Like you can add nai, or you can add mas, stuff like that. So yeah, this is the mas stem. So let's make some space and let's make a few examples so that we could really get like into the groove of how to do these things, okay? I'm going to make some space and we're going to get rid of this guy. IRC mas stem is also called renyoke. So ne, renyoke. Yes, that is correct. Yeah, I showed that earlier in the dictionary. If you want to talk about grammar with Japanese people, then renyoke is what you'll use. Note that renyoke is a little bit of a better, so I didn't want to go too deep into this, but note that renyoke can be a little bit of a better name, actually. It's more descriptive. Renyoke as a name is a little bit more descriptive than mas stem because it literally translates to like conjunctive form or continuative form. Because the truth is that renyoke, or what we usually call the mas stem, isn't only for adding mas. It has other usages as well, which are completely different. There is nothing inherently mas about the renyoke, okay? It just happens that renyoke is what you add mas to. So if you want to be like super correct, you can use like renyoke, maybe it helps for you. Like just like we said, like mizenke was the negative stem. Mizenke. Now mizenke itself is also used for other things that aren't the negative conjugation. So in a way, these are like maybe a little bit more descriptive. So I can't just say maske. Maybe people will understand. These are like sort of hip new words. Maske. I have heard teke as well as te form, but they're not really recognized in like Japanese like grammar school systems. But I mean, there's some problems with that either way. So yeah, maybe, I mean, people will know what you mean, I think, if you say maske. Okay, but the thing is, in Japanese grammar, whether that is good or bad, usually people don't think of something like, let's make an example, right? So you have kaku, which is to write. I'll make an example of kaku. So kaku is godan. Are there like a select few verbs, like a rule to determine godan or ichidan or whatever, what is it? Yes, but that I discussed in the previous 2 episodes. So if you want to, I can talk about it maybe after the lesson a little bit, or I'm about to be done. We're not going to do much more, but it's not part of today's lesson. If you want to maybe get like a very in-depth look, it is on the YouTube. It is episode 4 and 5. We talked in detail about how to recognize an ichidan verb, how to recognize a godan verb, stuff like that. All right, so you have like kaku, right? For an example, you would get kaki, which is the stem. Kaki. So the reason that something like maske is sort of different from how you would maybe see it in the Japanese school system is that this is sort of where the verb kaku ends, and then mas will really be treated as its own auxiliary verb that gets added to it. It's not like a conjugation of kaku theoretically, but rather it is a conjugation plus a verb that is added. But that's just a different way of thinking about it, really. Functionally speaking, you could still think of it as a conjugation, as the must conjugation. Kaeru can be both ichidan, godan if you want to mean, yeah, you have to use a kanji. So like kaeru with the to go home meaning is always godan. So it would be, what would be the must form of kaeru to go home, right? What would that be if we use our rule? Well, kaeru ends in ru, right? Kaeru. Well, this ends in ru, so what would be the must stem of that? Well, ru turns into ri, so we get kairi. Okay, so we get kaeri, and then mas, so you add mas. All right, there we go, kaerimasu. It's fairly simple. And then to make like another ichidan example, so we have V1, I think, is that right? Not sure now. Jason, hey, kaeru, so ne. There. So we have a bunch of ichidan verbs like oboeru. Okay, let's look at oboeru. All right, so oboeru, I'm not going to use kanji for now because it's not really that important for our purposes. O, bo, eru. So here, you really just don't have to know that much. 妖怪が帰る. When kanji is important, yes, kanji is always important. Dictionary will tell you when to look it up. Yes, oboeru. So oboeru is ichidan, right? It's an ichidan verb. So we know remove ru and add mas. That's as simple as it is. So oboemasu, oboemasu. You're done. That's all you need to do. Kairu, hairu, hashiru, kiru, shiru, so ne. These are some examples of some exceptions that Shirubu-san, by the way, Shirubu-san, konnichiwa, that Shirubu-san just posted for us. So yeah, there's a bunch of exception verbs. There is quite a few, but not too many. It's like, it just barely doesn't ruin your day. That's the sort of amount that you have. Now, one last thing that we need to learn is how to conjugate mas itself. Yes, you can conjugate mas, because think about it. Now we can say like tabemasu, I will eat. But how do you say I ate while being polite? So for that, the good part is we don't have to worry about the verb now. We know how to make the mas form, and once you know how to make the mas form, all you need to do is conjugate mas itself, because remember, essentially mas is itself a verb. So you can conjugate it into those 4 basic forms that we discussed in the last episode. So why not just do that? If you remember our trusty table, which was basically these fields here, I'm gonna draw the same table that I've drawn a few times now, which is non-past and past, and then it is positive and negative. Okay, so here we have positive and here we have negative. So this is our trusty table, tabemashita. So Sunnoise has already got one of them correct. So how do we conjugate mas? Well, it's really fairly simple. You learn this once and you're done, basically. ご飯を食べます。そうですね。完璧。100点満点. So you have mas here, which is the standard form, right? Mas, right? Mas. And then what is the negative of that? Well, the negative is masen. It just happens to be masen. So masen is a bit of a weird one, actually, but we'll get into it. So you have ma-sen. So why is ma-sen weird? Think about it. Every other verb in Japanese conjugates to something nai in its negative form, except for mas. Mas conjugates to ma-sen. And that's just a bit weird. It's a bit weird for a negative verb to end in n. It's just a bit strange. It's a bit of an oddity. Compared to any other verb, if you conjugate it to its negative form, it will use nai in one form or the other. It just happens that masen doesn't, or mas doesn't. Mas just conjugates to masen. I looked into this once, and it turns out this has to do with because it comes from masenu, and it just happens that masse is the mizenke of mas, so the negative stem, and nu is the like nai. It just happens that nu is used with mas, but nai isn't. That's just kind of how it is. I understand. Wakarimasen. I don't understand. Exactly. There you go. Wakarimasu. Wakarimasen. And again, see how it's pretty cool. You don't have to worry about wakari anymore once you know that it's wakarimasu. If you want to make it past tense or negative, all you need to understand is that you need to go from mas to masen. Chansune, thank you for the follow. Follow, arigatou gozaimasu. There you go. So, what is past tense? Past tense is once again fairly simple. We just do, well, all of these are simple, really. We get mashita. That's a bit of a wide sheet. Mashita. So you get something like tabemashita, mashita. And then this one here, again, the general pattern is that a negative past tense will usually be conjugated starting from the negative and then making it past. The negative past of masen is, or the negative of, or the past tense of masen is like a bit of a weird one yet again. It's masen deshita. That's just something you're gonna have to remember. I mean, you'll hear it plenty enough, so it shouldn't be hard to remember. It's very common. Masen deshita. And for those of you that remember from our copula episode, I just think this is the easiest, but I will study casual. Yeah, so from our, well, the reason this will seem easier to you is because once you have mas, you don't have to worry about it anymore, because mas is simple to conjugate, right? It's mas, masen, mashita, masen deshita. It's just these four, and with these four you can theoretically say any verb ever if you know how to get it into that form. But it's just not sufficient for every situation. Also because you have to later on learn other conjugations anyway, such as potential form or whatever form, passive, all these things that we will talk about in the future, which rely on you sort of understanding the dictionary form and the base conjugations. Yeah, tabemashimasu. So we're getting into some like grammatical oddities that would theoretically be correct because mas has a renyoke. If you go online and you look it up, mas itself has a renyoke, and the renyoke is a mas stem. So there is no real grammatical rule that says you couldn't add mas to that. So you get mashimasu. But in actuality, no one does this. Like, this is just not done. It's just not something you do, and it doesn't add any meaning. It just becomes weird. It just becomes useless. Basically, it's not used. But it is kind of a fun sort of grammar experiment at that point. Again, the negatives here are a bit of an oddity, as in masen deshita relying on the copula to become past is a bit weird. That's kind of stands out a little. But yeah, you need to sort of remember these four. And if you remember these four, you're kind of good. Gives you a little head start on te form. Anyway, that is true. Yes, if you know past tense, you know te form. All right. That's basically it, and we can make some examples now. For that, I'll probably use the text tool. So I will delete this table. Hopefully you have burned it into your brains indefinitely. Masen. So yeah, mas, masen, mashita, masen deshita. So let's grab our text tool. Let's just write like one or two simple little sentences that we can use to understand this a little bit better. And I should probably not use 60 points, probably enough. So for example, I can say something like, I'm going, glad to see you joined the cool kids in game grammar. Hey, yes. For example, we could have something like, I'm going to start the lesson. So something like, let's use some gairaigo, which is foreign words, borrowed words. So instead of jigyo, which means lesson, let's use resson, okay? Lesson, right? Yeah, lesson. Hajimemasu. Right? So, hajimemasu means I'm starting, which is hajimeru, which means to start something, to begin something. Hajimeru, right? Hajimeru, which is to start, to initiate, to commence. So if I say, lesson wo hajimemasu, I'm starting the lesson. which isn't really true because I'm ending the lesson in a bit. So how would we say like I did start the lesson or I started the lesson? Well, we just put it in past tense and we learned this is very simple. Instead of mas, we would just use mashita. レッスンを始めました. I started the lesson. Also, where can I get that cool dictionary? You can get it right here. 辞書. You can also, by the way, use a dictionary in my chat if you so desire. 始める. If ever you see something and you want to share it with people in chat, there you go. There's also a chat command for that. Just try not to spam it too much. レッスンを始めました. I started the lesson. Cool, alright. Fairly simple. What else could we say? Does ought mark accusative nouns? It does indeed, yes. That is correct. Ought is a direct object marker, and direct object nouns are in the so-called accusative case. So if your language has a accusative case, then you may have sort of an intuitive understanding of how ought works. The problem with English speakers is that English does not really have an accusative case, at least not one that you could recognize. But yeah, if your language does have one of them, then maybe it will be much easier for you to understand. Or German, for example, has an accusative case. So if I were to talk to a German, I would just tell them ought marks the accusative case, and they would sort of probably understand if they know what an accusative case is. It also, you can just say it marks the direct object for most cases. I versus me is kind of close. I guess, yeah, maybe. I'd have to think about it. Thinking about cases in English is very tricky, because it's like hard. But, 私あなたを食べます. Yeah, I eat you. You can say 私は if you want to be more expressive there, sort of like a drop particle. 私あなた食べます. Yeah, kind of. So dropping particles is sort of like an art form, not really. So generally you can drop particles, but dropping too many can sound a bit weird, and not dropping and like saying too many things. So for example, you would say, if you're already, this is sort of a weird off-topic thing, but if you're already dropping particles, you probably wouldn't say watashi in the first place. You would just say like あなたを食べます. You would say oh. I wouldn't drop the o there, but it's like very hard to explain this, sort of like, but you'll figure it out. It's just a matter of like listening to how it's natural to use the language. So like dropping every particle is of course kind of bad because it'll what is that? That looks like Chinese. Okay, let's look at another example. For example, something like for example, like something with ませんでした. So like did not do something. So we can say 宿題, right? 宿題, which means homework, or you can say like やりませんでした. 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 You could say this to your teacher, but like I did not do my homework. やりませんでした. Or I didn't do my homework. Well, you wouldn't say this to your teacher, you'd say this like to your mom after you didn't do them at school. You'd be like, I did not do my homework. Your mom would be like, 学校どうだった? How was school? And you'd say, 宿題やりませんでした. I hadn't done my homework. I didn't do my homework. Something like that, right? Yeah, やる becomes やります. やります. And then やりませんでした. It's all very simple, really. Let's also look like, we can look up 宿題. And I can't type 宿題. Reply 死ぬ. やりませんでした is didn't do. Yeah, exactly. Did not do. やりませんでした. Why やりません not します? Sort of just a choice there. やらないか. やらないか. またこれが. やります. Yeah, so they both mean to do. So you could also say 宿題をしませんでした. That works too. やります. It's kind of tricky to explain the difference between yaru and suru. It's just that yaru can be a little bit more, a little bit stronger of an expression. Yaru can sometimes mean a little bit like you put a little bit of effort into it, or you put a little bit of like spirit into it. Yaru can also be a little bit more casual, a little bit more slangy in some situations. Yaru can also mean some quite different things. But yeah, it's like talking about suru versus yaru becomes very nuanced very quickly. In this case, it's very close. It sounds like you're a little bit more invested, if anything. Shukudai o yaru is like, I'm gonna do my homework, and shukudai o suru is like, I'm gonna do my homework. But really, in this case, they're fairly synonymous. Alright, guys, I hope this was pretty good. Remember, This lesson, we talked about politeness. We sort of gave an intro to politeness. Remember, politeness is relative. It has to do with the relative standing between the people that are talking to each other. Is someone your boss? Is someone your friend? Is someone younger than you, older than you? So these are all situations that can inform whether you should use polite language or not. As a default, if you're meeting someone for the first time, they're around your age or older, use Masu-form. Just stick to it. It's better. You'll be received a little bit better. Yeah. Yarimashita. So, right? It's just as a default, it's a little bit better to just stick to teinego, another word that we learned today. Teinego, mas, this, right? Using mas and using this. We talked about using this in the copula episode a little bit. So if you want to review that, that's lesson 2, the copula. Yeah, that's basically that. And then we learned that to make the mas form, it's very simple. You need to get the mas stem, also called renyoke, the mas stem. For ichidan verbs, that is easy. For ichidan verbs, you just remove ru, because every stem for an ichidan verb is just the verb without ru. That's every stem that you can make for ichidan verbs. There exists no other stem for them, so you just add mas to that. And for godan verbs, it's a vowel shift from u to i. So something like yaru becomes yari, and then mas. All right. Well, I hope this lesson was comprehensive. I thought this would be shorter, but it turned into about an hour as well, which is okay. I'm aiming for about an hour generally. So I hope this made sense to everyone that was listening. I'll mention it here real quick while we're still doing this. Actually, no, I'll end the episode first. I'll end the recording. This goes on YouTube, so if you want to watch this on YouTube, here's the tag JP. The stream will go on, by the way, so don't go anywhere. Just the recording will be over. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I'll see you in lesson 7, where I don't know what we'll do, but we'll do something, okay? I'll figure it out. Thank you so much.